The text message glowed on my phone screen at 2:37 a.m. I'm staying at Mom's tonight. Don't wait up. I stared at those words, my thumb hovering over the keyboard, fighting the urge to respond. This wasn't the first time Thomas had chosen his mother over me, but something felt different. The finality in those 11 words sent a chill through my body that had nothing to do with the autumn air seeping through our bedroom window. I didn't know it then, but that message would be the beginning of the end, not just of my marriage, but of the woman I used to be. The woman who spent 6 years trying to compete with her mother-in-law for her husband's attention. The woman who believed that if she just tried harder, loved more deeply, or showed more patience, she could fix what was fundamentally broken. Today, 3 years later, I run one of the largest support networks for women dealing with similar situations. We call ourselves the Mother-in-Law Survivors, though we laugh about the name now. But before I tell you about how I help others find their way out of the maze I once wandered, let me take you back to the beginning. Because to understand how I became who I am today, you need to know who I was then. I met Thomas Harrison at a friend's wedding in spring 2015. He was the best man, and I was a bridesmaid, a setup so cliché that we both joked about it during his toast. He was charming, successful, and looked at me like I was the only person in the room. When he asked for my number, I didn't hesitate. Our courtship was a whirlwind. Within 6 months, we were living together, and by the 1-year mark, he had proposed. Everything seemed perfect, except for one small detail I chose to ignore. His relationship with his mother, Margaret. Margaret Harrison was not your typical mother-in-law. She wasn't openly hostile or obviously controlling. Instead, she wielded her influence with surgical precision, using guilt and manipulation so subtle that I often questioned whether I was imagining things. She would call Thomas at all hours, always with some crisis that only he could solve. When we announced our engagement, she ended up in the emergency room with stress-induced chest pains that mysteriously disappeared once Thomas promised to visit her every Sunday. "She's just protective," Thomas would say, defending her. Dad's death hit her hard. I understood that losing her husband had been devastating. But what I didn't understand then was how she had transferred all of her emotional needs onto her only son. The wedding planning became a battlefield, though Margaret never once raised her voice or made direct demands. She would just make suggestions, endless suggestions, each one accompanied by a story about family tradition or a reminder of how this would be her only chance to see her son get married. Thomas always sided with her, and I, wanting to be the perfect, understanding wife, gave in time after time. Our wedding day set the tone for what would become our marriage. Margaret had a front row seat at the ceremony, wore white despite my mother's horrified objections, and gave a 20-minute speech at the reception about her 2 special children. I smiled through it all, telling myself that this was normal, that all marriages had their challenges, that things would get better once we settled into our routine. They didn't. The first year of marriage was a series of small surrenders. Thomas and I bought a house just 10 minutes from Margaret's, though we'd initially planned to live in the city. Our Sunday visits became twice-weekly dinners and daily check-ins. Margaret had a key to our house for emergencies, which she used whenever she felt like dropping by, usually when Thomas and I were having a rare moment alone. I tried everything to make it work. I invited Margaret to join us for holidays, planned special mother-son outings, and even suggested she take up a hobby or join a grief support group. But nothing changed. If anything, her hold on Thomas grew stronger. The breaking point came gradually, then all at once. Thomas started spending more nights at his mother's house, claiming she was having anxiety attacks or couldn't be alone. Our intimate moments became increasingly rare, interrupted by Margaret's calls or Thomas's guilt over leaving her alone. When I suggested couples therapy, Thomas accused me of being selfish and unsupportive. "She needs me," he would say, his voice tight with anger. "She's all alone in this world." "What about what I need?" I would ask, but the answer was always in his silence. The night of that final text message, I lay awake until dawn, scrolling through old photos on my phone. There we were on our honeymoon in Hawaii, both smiling, both tanned and happy. There we were at Christmas, Thomas sandwiched between Margaret and me on the couch, his body language already telling a story I hadn't wanted to read. The photos became a timeline of our relationship's decay, each image showing me losing a little more of myself, trying harder to fit into a space that was never meant for me. When Thomas came home the next morning, I was sitting at our kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee and the divorce papers I had drawn up months ago but had been too afraid to show him. He didn't look surprised. "Mom thinks this is for the best," he said, and in that moment I realized he probably discussed our marriage with her before coming to talk to me. I signed the papers first. The months following our separation were both the hardest and most transformative of my life. I moved out of our house and into a small apartment, taking only what was undeniably mine. The space felt enormous and empty, even though it was half the size of our marital home. The silence was deafening. Initially, I did what many women do after a divorce. I blamed myself. I spent hours analyzing every decision, every argument, every compromise I'd made. I wondered if I'd been too demanding, too jealous, too insecure. I lost weight, couldn't sleep, and found myself crying in inappropriate places: the grocery store, my office bathroom, the gym. But slowly, something began to change. In the quiet of my new life, without the constant drama and tension of competing with Margaret, I started to hear my own voice again. I began journaling, first just to empty my mind of the circular thoughts that kept me awake at night, but then as a way to track my healing. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, who specialized in relationship trauma and family dynamics. It was Dr. Chen who first helped me understand that what I'd experienced had a name: emotional incest syndrome, also known as covert incest. This is when a parent uses their child as a substitute for an adult relationship, creating an unhealthy emotional dependency that affects the child's ability to form healthy romantic relationships. "What happened wasn't your fault," Dr. Chin told me during one particularly difficult session. "You were trying to compete with a relationship that was established long before you came into the picture. It's like trying to win a race that was rigged from the start." Those words were the key that unlocked something in me. I began researching, reading everything I could find about emotional incest and its effects on marriages. I joined online support groups and was shocked to discover how many women had stories similar to mine. Some had fought this battle for decades, losing pieces of themselves year by year. Others had children who were now caught in the same toxic dynamic. The more I learned, the more I realized that this wasn't just about me anymore. There was a pattern here, a societal issue that needed to be addressed. Women needed to know they weren't alone, that they weren't crazy for feeling the way they did, and most importantly, that they had options. One night, unable to sleep, I started a blog. I called it Breaking Free: Stories of Survival and Growth. In my first post, I shared my story, all of it, raw and unfiltered. I wrote about the red flags I'd ignored, the compromises that had eroded my self-worth, and the moment I finally chose myself. The response was overwhelming. Within days, my inbox was flooded with messages from women around the world. They shared their stories, their pain, their fears, and their hopes. Many had never told anyone what they were going through, ashamed to admit that they were losing to their mother-in-law or afraid of being judged for not making their marriage work. I responded to every message, staying up late into the night, sharing resources, offering support, and sometimes just listening. As the community grew, I realized we needed more than just a blog. We needed a comprehensive support system. That's how Mother-in-Law Survivors was born. What started as a simple blog evolved into a multifaceted support network. We now have weekly online support groups, a resource library of articles and books, partnerships with family therapists who understand our unique challenges, and an emergency hotline for women in crisis. We also offer practical assistance, everything from legal referrals to temporary housing solutions for women who need to leave their situations quickly. Our network of volunteers includes financial advisors, career counselors, and mental health professionals who donate their time to help women rebuild their lives. But perhaps most importantly, we offer hope. Hope that there is life after this kind of betrayal. Hope that you can rebuild yourself stronger and wiser than before. Hope that you are worthy of love that doesn't require you to compromise your dignity or sense of self. Today, my life looks nothing like I imagined it would when I walked down the aisle 8 years ago. I'm not a wife anymore, but I am a leader, a mentor, and an advocate. I've helped hundreds of women recognize their worth and find the strength to choose themselves. Last month, I received a wedding invitation from Thomas. He's marrying again, a woman 10 years younger than me. Part of me wanted to reach out, to warn her about what she's walking into. But I know that's not my role. Instead, I added her to our confidential watch list. a service we provide to track potential cases and offer support when needed. Margaret, I heard, still lives 10 minutes away from Thomas. She's already announced that she's selling her house to move in with them after the wedding to help with any future grandchildren. History, as they say, repeats itself. But that's not my story anymore. My story is about breaking cycles, about turning pain into purpose, about helping other women write their own endings. Every time I get a message from a woman who's found the courage to set boundaries, every time I see someone in our support group offering encouragement to a newcomer, every time I hear about a successful transition to independence, I know that my experience had a purpose. Through my work with mother-in-law survivors, I've identified several key patterns and lessons that I share with every woman who comes to us for help. 1. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong in your relationship, it probably is. Those early warning signs I ignored. They were my intuition trying to protect me. 2. You can't fix someone else's family dynamics. The problems between Thomas and his mother existed long before I came into the picture, and they would have continued regardless of what I did. 3. Love shouldn't require constant sacrifice. If you're always the one compromising, always the one trying harder, always the one giving up pieces of yourself, it's not a healthy relationship. 4. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for your mental and emotional health. You have the right to protect your space, your time, and your relationship. 5. You are not responsible for someone else's happiness. This applies to both your partner and their family members. 3 years after that late-night text message, I can honestly say I'm grateful for my experience, not because it was easy or because I enjoy seeing others go through similar situations, but because it led me to my true purpose. Every day, I work with women who are just beginning their journey to self-discovery and healing. I see myself in their tear-filled eyes and trembling voices. I recognize their fear, their uncertainty, their desperate need to believe that they can make things work if they just try harder. And every day, I get to tell them what I wish someone had told me. You are stronger than you know, and you deserve more than this. Our organization continues to grow. We're currently developing a preventive education program for premarital counselors and wedding planners, helping them identify and address potential red flags before couples commit to marriage. We're also working on a documentary series that will share stories of survival and transformation, bringing these often hidden struggles into the light. But perhaps our most important work happens in the quiet moments, in late-night phone calls with women who feel alone and scared, in support group meetings where tears turn to laughter, in the small victories of women learning to put themselves first, often for the first time in their lives. Last week, I received a card from a woman named Claire, one of the first members of our support group. She had just celebrated 1 year of independence after leaving a situation similar to mine. Inside the card was a quote that now hangs in my office. Sometimes the happiest ending isn't the one you keep wishing for, but something you never thought to dream of. Those words sum up my journey perfectly. I never dreamed that my failed marriage would lead me to help other women find their strength. I never imagined that my pain would become a beacon of hope for others. I never thought I would be grateful for one of the most difficult experiences of my life. But here I am, stronger than ever, surrounded by a community of warriors who refuse to be silenced or diminished. We are the mother-in-law survivors, and we are rewriting our stories one page at a time. To any woman reading this who sees herself in my story, know this. You are not alone. You are not crazy. And you have options. Whether you choose to stay and fight for your relationship or leave to save yourself, there is a community waiting to support you. Your story isn't over. In fact, it might just be beginning. As I write this, sitting in my office overlooking the city I once thought I'd never live in, I can't help but smile at life's unexpected turns. On my desk are dozens of letters from women we've helped, each one a reminder of why this work matters. Next to them is a photo of our latest support group graduation ceremony, 15 women, all standing tall, all smiling, all ready to begin their new lives. Tomorrow, I'll lead another workshop, share more resources, answer more calls. I'll listen to more stories of women finding their voice, setting boundaries, choosing themselves. And I'll remember that text message from 3 years ago, the one that felt like an ending but turned out to be just the beginning. Because sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can lead you to the best version of yourself. Sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted opens the door to everything you were meant to have. Sometimes, just sometimes, your broken heart can help heal others. And that, I've learned, is the most beautiful plot twist of all. Epilogue. To Thomas, if you ever read this, thank you, not for leaving, but for forcing me to find my strength. Thank you for showing me what I didn't want, so I could discover what I truly needed. Your mother still sends me Christmas cards, believe it or not. I don't open them anymore, but I keep them as reminders of how far I've come. To every woman who has ever felt like she was losing herself in someone else's story, your life is your own. Your happiness matters. Your dreams count. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. And to Margaret, I hope you find peace. I hope you learn to let go, but most of all, I hope your new daughter-in-law finds us before she needs us.